I just answer the phones, man.
Just answer the phone. Alright, let's get the arm set up so I'm ready to respond to any videos online and talk to the stage. Yeah. The live stream is done.
Cool.
Yeah, this one's live. Yeah, depending on how long it takes people to trickle in, I'll give us till like 5 after. But you know,
Sure.
If it's going to be a light one, which as I said, I thought might be very likely given the odd time this month, well, then we'll just proceed.
It's all good.
That definitely happens to me sometimes. I heard somebody saying back here, so there's at least one more person coming. Frankly, I don't even mind if this month is slow. This is sort of I'm done with my wedding. I'm sort of reclaiming my life bit by bit.
Right, I bet. It's a great wedding, by the way.
EFF Boston?
Is it a EFF?
Yeah, we're in.
Okay, change the layout.
I didn't have anything to do with that. Just like I didn't have anything to do with the odd day of the month this month, but here we are. Gonna give it a few more master people to trickle in 5 minutes or so, and then we'll get going with what we have.
Yeah, it was funny. Right after the eclipse, I have a friend in the UK that texted me. He's like, "So did anybody get to see the eclipse?" And I just like sent back one of the pictures I took.
Yeah, well, the weather decided to accommodate. Very
Right?
gracious of
We
it.
got real lucky there. Just right at the last minute, it broke. And
Although I was reading interesting stuff saying that actually, even when there is bad or cloudy weather, that it often clears right before totality during eclipses because the temperature drop results in a change in the airflow, which can literally blow the clouds out of the way.
That seems to be what happened.
I was going to say, I don't know enough about weather patterns to know if that's true or not, but I like it, so let's go with it.
I would refer us to the, immortal It's Always Sunny clip of like, that sounds wrong, but I don't know enough to dispute that. this doesn't actually sound wrong, but the point still stands, of like, that explanation sounds plausible to my science brain, but I don't know enough to say for sure.
Yeah, the guy who came up with it probably doesn't either.
See, I watched so much Futurama. When you said that, it made me think of Futuramas. Well, I don't know about any of that, but I don't have the wherewithal to defend myself, so.
I mean, the time you're saying Fry would say.
Oh yeah, it was Fry.
No, I mean, that ties also into the Sunny where like, Mac is like going around like saying evolution's a lie, and they're trying to call him on it, but they're just saying like, you're just blindly believing this stupid book written a long time ago, and then he's like, but you're blindly believing paper scientists wrote without having read them, and then they're like, well, he's got us there, unfortunately.
I was gonna say he's not wrong. Love it.
Now we have 3 more minutes and we'll get going. As I said, I do not mind a slow one this month. But yeah, as I said, given timetables at my thing, like maybe, if you're still looking, maybe come July, I might circle back on it. Because as I said, I do think you do have the gig whenever we fill it if you're still looking to want it, basically.
We can see.
Okay. Hello. EFF Boston? Yes. Yeah, we're just waiting a few people to trickle in and we can get started. noticed how busy I am. I still have not fully finished the dang website migration, even though it's trivial. I just have been that busy.
Dang.
What is the trivial non-urgent stuff that's so like?
Well, it is, yeah, it's like it both is and isn't, because I promised the existing hosting provider that I will get it off her server as soon as I can. So it's more a case of me just feeling guilty that I keep stalling her more than anything else.
I have this knack for assuming that things are going to be harder than they are.
Yeah, I know once I actually just get through, and it's like I did half of it, but then I ran into a minor technical difficulty that, it's not hard, I can fix it. It was just enough inertia given how busy I am to be like, I'll get back to this.
The one that will forever irritate me was when we moved into our current apartment, the ISP wanted to charge $15 a month for a static IP address so I could self-host things and do port forwarding. So somebody recommended Cloudflare Tunnel.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I'll put that on my to-do list to look into. And 2 weeks later, I finally made the time. It's like a copy and paste of one line of code on the server.
Yep.
Took literally less than 5 minutes. I'm like, hold on, I've been putting this off for how long now?
Yeah,
I was so
one
mad.
time in college, there was you could go request a key be made that would give you access to some of the buildings on campus. A lot of students just did it because why not access? And I swear to God, I finally got around to doing it when I was halfway through my senior year, even though it took literally 30 minutes.
3.5 years.
Yeah, but I did it.
That's the important part, right?
Exactly.
Better late than never.
Exactly. All right, well, 5 after. I'll go ahead and get us started, and we'll see if anybody else filters in, but I'll get us started. Okay. Oh, welcome to the latest installment of the EFF Austin Monthly Meetup. Thanks for joining us both in person and online. I see old and new faces. Welcome all. To those of you who are new to us and what is going on, or maybe you found us on social media but are still what's going on. My name's Kevin Welch. I'm the current president of the board at EFF Austin. EFF Austin is a long-standing Austin-based digital civil liberties organization. We work closely with Electronic Frontier Foundation based out of San Francisco. They're the nation's oldest and largest digital civil liberties advocacy group. You can kind of think of them as the ACLU for the internet. They work to protect your rights in emerging technological spaces, especially your First Amendment right to freedom of speech and your Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable search and seizure, but implicitly your right to privacy. They do a lot of good work, mostly at the federal advocacy level, protecting things like net neutrality, end-to-end encryption, Section 230 of the CDA, and just stuff that allows you to express yourself and be creative and be safe in emerging technological spaces. And so they've been around since 1990. We're almost as old as them. We've been around since 1991. We are the oldest member of what is known as the EFA, or the Electronic Frontier Alliance. This is kind of a peer-to-peer affiliate activist network around the US of about 100 legally distinct groups that we all share common cause and values on these issues, and where EFF is mostly federal, the EFA groups mostly do things at city and state level around the country. As I said, EFF Austin is the oldest member of the Alliance. The second oldest, I think, is EF Georgia from '96. There's about 100 groups all across the country, although interestingly enough, not only are we the only one in Austin, we're actually the only one in Texas, so we have a lot of ground to cover. We're primarily an educational organization, mostly taking the form of our monthly meetups, granted by our gracious host, Capital Factory. They usually are on the second Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. This month is a little weird, and it's on the fourth Tuesday because I was both requested to move it by Cap Factory because there was a conflict with our normal time, and because I was getting married the day before the normal meetup time. And so I was thinking I might not be in a state to want to host a meetup anyway. So normally, ignore this month. Normally, they are the second Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. We feature speakers on a variety of topics around emerging technology, emerging law around technology, and just to give you a preview, next month we're going to be featuring a remote speaker in the form of Carrie Parker, who runs a very popular podcast and an associated book that launched the podcast called Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. but he is an expert on various things related to privacy, security, cryptography, etc. Kerry is specifically going to be talking to us about how computers handle randomness and pseudo-random numbers and the role that they play in keeping everything encrypted and secure. So I encourage you to check that out. We're also in June going to be featuring my friend Evan Enzer, who's been associated with another EFA group called STOP. They're based out of New York City. They're the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project. They mostly fight against NYPD surveillance in New York City. But Evan's going to explicitly be talking to us about his research that was somewhat inspired by a big Mozilla report that made the rounds about how modern cars are a spying privacy nightmare. So Evan's going to be talking to us about that in June. So that's a little preview of some of what we have coming up over the next several months. Also, as I said, while we're mostly educational, we do other things. We've been known to occasionally throw pretty cool cyberpunk parties when I can find eccentric tech millionaires to give us money. If you know any, please introduce me, because it's been a while since we've had one. We do that. We also actually, believe it or not, we do a little bit of political advocacy both at the city and state level. We gave testimony in regards to Texas's HB4, which was the big data privacy omnibus bill. We basically told them, hey, it's great you're doing this because there's literally no law on this. We also told them we didn't think they were going far enough on it. They didn't listen to us, of course, but it's on the record, our recommendations. Maybe the next legislative session we can push the law in an even better direction. We also, at the city level, were very involved in the debate around automated license plate readers coming back in Austin. While we were not able to stop them coming back, which would have been our preference, we did get much stronger rules in place around their use, especially around data retention. We lost by 1 vote getting data retention down to 3 minutes, which is the same as state law in New Hampshire. We couldn't quite pull that off, but we still got it down to 7 days, which is still a far stricter retention period than almost anywhere else in the country. So we are very proud of that victory. Anywho, that's a little bit about us. Anyway, now what I usually do is I introduce our speaker and turn things over to them. I guess I will also say it's a meetup that's a little on the smaller side this month, but also I like to see if there's anybody in the audience who has any announcements they'd like to share. Shameless self-promotion's totally fine as long as they think it would be relevant and of interest to the digital civil liberties community. If anybody has something, they're welcome to raise it, but if not, I will introduce our speaker and we will go ahead. So, our speaker this month is joining the club of people who have spoken at least twice is Nate Bartram. He is the founder and editor of The New Oil, a website including a weekly blog, podcast, and videos that aims to make data privacy and cybersecurity easy for those without a technical background. Whether you're looking to keep yourself safe from identity theft and common hacks, whether you simply object to mass surveillance, or anything in between, his site will help you learn the basics about protecting your identity, your safety, and your data in a way that's accessible and achievable. So, last year, Nate talked to us a bit about passwords and password managers. Well, later last year, Passkeys were released to the public, most notably via Android and iOS mobile devices. And they've been heralded as the next step in account security. Easier than passwords, but more secure. Or so the prevailing narrative goes. And, we at EFF Austin like to, poke at prevailing narratives and see if they hold up, basically. So, in this talk, Nate is going to resume the theme of account security and authentication with an entry-level overview of this new technology. What are passkeys? How do they work? What are the advantages and disadvantages? When do they make sense to use compared to old-fashioned password managers, and when do they don't? And how do you even get started on this new technology? And I only know the answer to some of these things, so without further ado, take it away, Nate.
Thank you. Real quick, for those who don't know, Kerry Parker made his own, on the topic of randomness, made his own badge for DEF CON that generates randomness. I'm excited to hear that. That's really cool.
I'm also excited to hear that.
Oh yeah, if he doesn't talk about it, you gotta ask him about it. It's awesome. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm Nate, and I will be talking about passkeys. It's just a habit of mine. Whenever I do a talk, I like to kind of overview what I'm planning to let you guys know about. So specifically, we're gonna talk about what are passkeys, how they work, pros and cons, when to use them, when to avoid them. I mean, Kevin covered all that pretty well. And I do want to give credit to EFF wrote a 2-part series. The first one is titled What the Blank is a Passkey, and the second one is Passkeys and Privacy. By far not the only thing that's been written about passkeys, but very comprehensive, and I found it really enlightening. So,
Going to slightly dim the light just so the contrast
Sure.
on the live stream will be better.
cool.
I have to remember where you do that. You go on.
I think it's over there, because that's where the switch
right.
was.
Yes, it is. Thank you. You go on.
All right. And then I also like to be upfront about any credentials I may have. And the answer is formally, I don't. I did not go to school for cybersecurity. I don't work in IT, anything like that. But I got into privacy around 2016, 2017, and I have definitely put thousands of hours into this. I've read reputable nonfiction books. I listened to podcasts, YouTube videos. I follow the experts on their various blogs, social media accounts, etc. I think I'm at the point now where I need to start graduating to like actual white papers, which are hit or miss. Some of them I understand, some of them are just way too technical. But yeah, I put a lot of work into this. So, and then he mentioned my claim to fame is kind of the new oil, which is
Amazing.
thank you. I think it's all right. Yeah, so I founded that in 2018. The long story short is it was originally just kind of a place for me to organize my thoughts and maybe share some recommendation with friends and family, but it ended up really catching on, and we now get about, numbers are a little low this month, but usually it's over 10,000 visitors a month, 10 to 15,000. If you add up like Mastodon, YouTube, all that kind of stuff, 15,000 followers, and that does not include the podcast, which is its own separate thing, which I think just hit 15,000 subscribers. So. And then I'm also a board member here at EFF Austin as of a couple months ago.
So we're happy to have you.
Thank you again. Okay, so from the top, what is a passkey? And I think it's really important to talk about what it's not. I'm kind of side-eyeing ChatGPT here, but that's okay. It is not, yeah, anyone who's used it is not surprised. It is not a security key. It is not a password. It is not a passcode. It is not a passphrase. It is not a PIN. It's not any of that stuff, although I guess it's kind of close to a security key.
It's sort of a software-defined security key.
Right, and I'll get into that in a second. But so this comes from that EFF article I mentioned, and I'm going to quote it here. A passkey is approximately 100 to 1,400 bytes of random data generated on your device, such as a phone, laptop, or security key, for the purpose of logging in on a specific website. From then on, you can use that passkey to log into that website without entering a password. I'm going to go over this a little more later, but it's basically, if you're familiar with a public and private key pair, that's really all it is. It's just, I think they've tried to implement it in a more user-friendly way. And the goal behind a passkey is to stop poor password hygiene. So, for example, weak passwords are pretty common. I have run into a lot of people who claim to have a strong password, and the emphasis there was a strong password, which I don't think I put it in here, but literally earlier this month, there was a story about a major, like a news story, about a major website, not like Facebook major, but like a well-known website that was storing passwords in plain text in the year of our Lord 2024.
Yeah, don't matter how strong it is if it's in plain text.
And that's what I always try to tell people is, the last time I was here, I talked about passwords and I explained hashing and how all that works and how they're supposed to securely store and verify your passwords. But all it takes is one website doing that or using an outdated hashing algorithm like MD5 or whatever. Your one good password that may be really good, now it's out there. So that's the whole point of a passkey. So explaining how private and public key pairs work in general is kind of difficult in my opinion. But
For non-technical or mathy people, it's a whole talk in and of itself.
Right, which I'm actually looking at my slide here. I'm going to talk about that next. So this is the actual user-facing side. So you create them in the settings the same way that you would change your password or add two-factor. So you log into a website, you go to your account settings or whatever, and I did actually create an example here that we'll go over later, but it is then stored on a password manager, a browser, or a device. So you could use Bitwarden as a password manager I like, Chrome, which I don't recommend, but for example, Chrome, the iPhone, Apple keychain, not a fan of that one either, but probably better than Chrome. You can have, this is kind of hard to explain. Not really. You can have more than one passkey per service, but you cannot use the same passkey across multiple services. So one of the examples that I think it was in that EFF article is theoretically, if you had Netflix, and you wanted to share Netflix with somebody, which you can't do anymore because Netflix has cracked down on that. But theoretically, in the golden days, you would have to create another passkey for them, which would probably involve being with them to do it. But either way, like you would each have your own passkeys that you could use to log in. Which I'll try to remember that when we go over the concerns later. So again, it's just a cryptographic key pair. If you guys are familiar with that, PGP, for example, you have your public key and your private key. It's literally exactly the same as far as I can tell. And current support is very inconsistent. And when I wrote WTF there, I'm specifically thinking of TikTok, who does support passkeys unless you have a business account. Don't know why. That's
Seems like that'd actually be a higher profile hacking target, a valuable business account.
That's the decision they made. I also wonder why they insist on emailing me a code every time I log in, even though I have the app set up.
Fun.
But like the TOTP, but it's TikTok, whatever. And then just real quick for anyone who's not familiar with key pairs, is anybody not familiar with cryptographic key pairs? Has everybody kind of got that down? Okay, well in case there's anyone online, I'll just go real quick. So you have a public key and a private key. The public key, you go wherever you want. There's servers you can publish it on where people can look it up. You can publish it on your website, things like that. The private key should always stay with you. It should stay on your phone, your password manager, your device, whatever. And then what people can do is they can use the public key to encrypt it and send it to you, but only you can decrypt it with the private key. The example that I use, and I've seen some other people use, is like a mailbox. You can put the address out there, people can mail you anything, you're the only one with a key that can unlock it and open it up. So pretty straightforward. Man, I'm already up to the example. Oh, no, not quite yet. I was gonna say this might be quick. So there's a couple of resources out there just for those who are interested in maybe checking out passkeys. This one comes from 1Password, and I can actually pull up the website if you want. It's called passkeys.directory, and it's just a list of services that we know accept password or passkeys. So I know you guys probably can't see it back there, but they've got Adobe, Air New Zealand, Amazon. It keeps going further down. That was just a screenshot. And then actually recently, just before I give this talk, this one's Bitwarden, right? Yeah, I think it's Bitwarden has this crowdsourced. It's their version of it. So here we've got, again, Amazon, Arpari, I'm not sure what that is, Off Gear, Best Buy, Bitwarden, Beyond Identity, Carnival Cruises. I think that's Carnival Cruises. Yeah, so if you're interested, if you're like, maybe I want to check out passkeys, what websites do I use that support it? You can go here. They all have search functions, or you can just browse. So, yeah, pretty cool stuff. All right, so now I'm already up to the example. So in this example, I've chosen to use GitHub because in the past, a lot of people have been familiar with GitHub. But again, it's going to be pretty much the same no matter where you go. So, yeah. The part I didn't include in here is step 1 is you have to make sure that you have some sort of passkey supporting app. So again, you could use a browser or a phone. The reason I'm not really a fan of that, first of all, I don't recommend saving any sort of login. I don't recommend saving anything in the browser, to be honest. I don't ever save my history, my cookies, my logins, any of that. I am probably being paranoid, but there is malware that can steal that stuff out of your browser. So, and it gets pretty bad. Like, they can steal the passwords that are in there, they can steal your history, they can steal your credit cards, they can steal the actual session token. So when they drop it into their browser, they are you now. They're logged in. They didn't have to steal your password because it thinks you're logged in. Again, I'm probably being paranoid. I don't know if that's ever going to happen to me, but just in case, I keep my browser clean.
Well, you don't tend to be EFF adjacent. You're not a little paranoid about this.
Right. If they're actually out to get you, it's just positive thinking. But for real, it's just an abundance of caution on my end. And then specifically with passkeys, and I'm going to talk about this a little later, nobody has really, one organization I'm aware of, has actually figured out how to export them and move them somewhere else. Well, export them. You can't really import them anywhere else yet, so I don't know about moving them. But so if you use the Apple keychain or the Android or Chrome or whatever, you're locked into that system now. And I just don't like anything that locks you in.
It's not like 2FA where it's a pain, but you can export to another 2FA app. It's
Right.
literally you can't.
It's more like Authy, where you just have to turn off 2FA and turn it back on and redo it in the new app. So that's really the only way to move your passkeys right now.
I assume that is also why you never recommend Authy, because they make moving such a pain.
I mean, there's a lot of reasons I don't recommend Authy now. They've had data breaches.
Fun.
Anyways, yeah. So it's just at least with these apps, like I said, you can't export them yet, except in Proton Pass. Sorry, except in Proton Pass, they're the only ones who can export passkeys at this time. But at least with like Bitwarden, Proton Pass, 1Password, certain KeyPass apps, at least then you can move those between devices. And it's just a freedom thing. Like, I'm not here to say everybody should move over to a custom OS or anything, but just to have that freedom and not be locked in my opinion, is always a good thing. Okay, so with this example, at the time I made it, I went with Bitwarden. I know it's hard to see, but tiny little plugin right up there, or extension, excuse me. And then specifically right here it says sign in with a passkey. And that'll come into handy later. But for now, we're going to use a username and a password. So I logged in. And then, again, it's kind of hard to see, I apologize, but I just went over here to my account settings, and I clicked on settings. This is the actual login screen for Bitwarden, or excuse me, GitHub. And these are my account settings. And again, it's going to vary from service to service. I'm sure you all know that, but just kind of walking through it. So here, they have password and authentication. And like I said, this is where I can change my password. If I scroll down further, I can add two-factor, or right here, I can use passkeys, and it says passwordless sign-in with passkeys. So from there, I click on it. It takes me to this page where it tells me, passkeys are these new sign-in feature. They're supposed to be more secure, et cetera, et cetera. Do you want to add a passkey? So I click on it, and again, it's going to vary based on whatever app you use. In my case, Bitwarden pops up, and it says, hey, I noticed you're logged in. I have this recorded. Is that the account you want to add? Because say if I had 2 or 3 GitHub accounts, which one are you trying to link this to? So I click on it, and the browser popped up and said, am I thinking of this right? I think so. Either way, it walks you through it. It pops up with like, do you want to add a passkey? You click yes, you get to name it, so I know what it is. That's Bitwarden. If I added like a YubiKey later, I could name it that. Really, really straightforward. And then this is just kind of the after, right here where it said passkeys. I have my Bitwarden one right here. So I should have brought my little pointer.
Yeah, I'm realizing we need a pointer.
It's all good. I have one, I just forgot to bring it. I was in such a rush to get here on time. So in this case, I've now signed out. I don't think it signs you out by default, but I've signed out just to prove a point. And earlier, I pointed out that it says sign in with a passkey. So I clicked that this time, and then it pops up right here. Like, hey, that's the passkey you want to use, right? Or again, if I had multiple accounts, pick the one you want. And notice I don't have anything in the login fields like I did the first time. That's my example. So the first time I had it in the login field, this time I don't. Boom. I didn't have to type a username, didn't have to type a password, didn't have to enter a TOTP code. So it really is cool.
So also interesting. So because it's tied to your username in the encryption, like you just provide the one thing, the passkey.
Yep.
Wow.
I literally did not put in a username or anything. It just Bitwarden popped down and was like, hey, which account? And I clicked it, and it was like, all right, cool, you're in.
And I assume, as you said, it's essentially a public-private key pair. I assume essentially the private key goes in Bitwarden and the public one GitHub keeps it?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
So, really easy to use. The advantages of passkeys. There's the obvious. No bad password practices. You're not using a weak password. You're not reusing passwords because each account will get its own. You have to redo that process with every single passkey, but God willing, it's a one-time process. So there's phishing protection. If you have a passkey, first of all, it's tied to that account. If I'm on, if it's a typo, like a malicious website, it's like github.com or something. It's not going to pop up because it doesn't recognize the domain, so it's not going to work. There's also, it can't be hacked. I can't accidentally, again, because I can't fall for phishing. You can't get my password and log in as me, and then same thing It's immune to credential stuffing. You can steal the public key. You can have the public key. Who cares? It's not tied to that. Well, it's tied to that, but you know what I mean? It's way, way harder.
I assume, to your point about phishing protection, I assume somebody who was really boneheaded could, even if it didn't pop up, think it was broken and copy-paste their passkey into the fraudulent website?
I don't think it would work.
It still doesn't.
Because there's no public key. I mean...
Well, if it's just trying to harvest your private key, it might work, because it's not the real website.
I don't think it sends your private key, though. I think it's just like a verification thing, like hashing. I'd have to double-check that.
Okay, I was just curious if, like, obviously that would require somebody being monumentally boneheaded, but I'm just trying to figure out, is it literally impossible or just much, much, much
You
harder?
just sign like an ephemeral message.
Okay.
And it's one-time use, so
Okay.
you can replay times.
I was going to say, the only thing I could think that might work is if you could get your hands on the public key and make a fake website and then convince them to somehow try and submit the private key. But even then, I don't know, like you said, you'd have to go through so many steps because
Right,
it just...
and that already takes out, like, in you know, script kiddies.
Yeah, at that point, you're going up against a...
enough they hacked the real website and stole the public keys.
Right, and then rebuilt a perfect copy with the public key in it, yeah. That would be a very advanced thing.
I mean, that sounds like straight up, yeah, that maybe a nation state would
Right.
do that, but that's not just a random person.
Right, and even then, like I said, I'm not even sure that would work. But
Okay. Like, they really are, like, well, they're for all practical purposes immune to phishing, is what people should take.
just like a YubiKey or a regular hardware token. Like, there's ways around it, but yeah, at that point, you're looking at such a high level of targeting, it's like...
It's not like current phishing with usernames and passwords,
Yeah.
where a lot of people, even fairly sophisticated people, can fall for it because, oh, you didn't notice that was a Cyrillic letter in the URL.
I've almost fallen for a Apple Podcast one. So
what is a YubiKey?
a YubiKey.
I've got one right here, but I mean, what is that? How does it fall into all of this?
So a YubiKey is kind of like a hardware version of a passkey. It operates on cryptographic key pairs, and it locks to the domain name. So actually, unlike the scenario he presented, you couldn't even force it to enter it. I mean, you could hit the button, but I don't think it would work the same way. It would do a completely different functionality. But they lock to the domain name, so if there's ever a phishing domain or something, it just won't work. But unlike this, so that actually is, unlike, passkeys are designed to completely replace passwords. The YubiKey is a two-factor. It can store passkeys. I don't know how many. I haven't played around with it that much.
But it's more intended as a stronger version of your 2FA app. A second form of verification, you use it still in conjunction with the username and password.
It's for those of us who can't use SMS because we don't have good internet.
Nobody should use SMS anyways.
Well, yeah,
So that's a win.
SMS is unencrypted and terrible. Whenever a service claims to be offering two-factor with SMS, I'm like, oh, so you don't offer two-factor.
Pretty much. I mean, it's certainly better than nothing, but yeah, it's
I mean, it's better than nothing because somebody still has to man in the middle it, but for any, like, knowledgeable
or
hacker,
swap your SIM number or
Yeah, but
whatever.
for any knowledgeable hacker, it would be trivial because it's not encrypted. It's in plain text, so.
Yeah. But yeah, on that note, that's one of the advantages of passkeys is, they're better than SMS two-factor, even email, push notification, which are not very good anyways, TOTP. They're pretty much on par with like YubiKeys and hardware tokens. And they are resistant to cross-site tracking. So I'm going to quote the EFF article again. If you create a passkey on site A and then a different passkey on site B using a different name, email address, IP address, etc., which to be fair is a little more than most people do, but for those with high threat models, the two sites shouldn't be able to correlate the separate identities even if they're sharing information behind the scenes. Each passkey you create is unique, and therefore there are some small caveats to be aware of, which we're going to go into next. But yeah, that is a concern with YubiKeys as well, is a lot of people wonder, like, well, can they track me if I use the same YubiKey on multiple websites? And the answer is no. I forget exactly why that is with the YubiKeys specifically, but they do have protections built in against that. That is something they factored in. So the drawbacks of passkeys. Low and inconsistent adoption. Like I said, TikTok, you can use it, but you can't. Amazon, you can. Maybe some other places. I don't use a lot of mainstream social media websites, but it's really inconsistent. It's also...
Speaking of, do any of the Fediverse sites support it?
Most of them.
Most of them. Very
I use it on Mastodon. I use it on Nextcloud, which I know isn't really Fediverse. Not on PeerTube. I wish they did.
Does Lemmy support it yet?
I don't have a Lemmy account. I don't know.
I do technically, and even actually on an invite-only server, but I have yet to break my Reddit addiction and really move over there, even though I should.
I lurk on Lemmy and it's fantastic. But I keep telling myself one of these days I'm going to spin up a server and then I'll have an account. So that's why I haven't made one yet.
Okay.
I'll get around to it eventually.
Same.
Exactly. I was also going to say inconsistent adoption. Some of them do actually, some websites do treat passkeys like a two-factor, like a YubiKey, which, I mean, granted, is it's good. It's not really what they were designed to do, but it's still really good security. I've also noticed, because I use a lot of different browsers, some hardened browsers especially don't work with them, like the Tor browser doesn't accept, I'm thinking of hardware keys, I apologize. Ignore that.
Well, Tor is for a very specific threat model.
Right.
There's lots of interesting, unique things as
Right.
part of that.
Well, I mostly found that in a Mulvad browser, which is just Tor browser without the Tor network, and, you know. Again, another big drawback, there's a limited ability to import and export passkeys right now. So if you try out Bitwarden and 6 months down the road, you're like, I think I want to move over to like, I'll be honest, and this is not me shilling it, but Proton Pass, I'm very impressed with how much they launched late last year, I think, and they've just been pumping out features left and right. They paid for an audit like a month after they launched it, fixed all of those issues right away. Like, they're really doing some impressive work there. They are the only one at this time that I'm aware of that can export passkeys, but again, there's nowhere to import them to. Nobody else allows that yet. 1Password and Bitwarden have both publicly stated they are working on that functionality and they do want to bring it, but they don't have it at this time.
What about, like, if you're a paranoid weirdo who doesn't want to trust a cloud password manager, what about KeyPass?
I was right about to say KeyPass XC, I know for sure allows passkeys. I don't know if you can. I would assume you can export them because it's all right there on the device. And when I looked at Proton Pass's export, it's basically like a spreadsheet. So I think it's right there in the spreadsheet. That would be my guess.
I assume, of course, the trade-off obviously be on the one hand, fine, you're, certain threat modelers you might not want to trust the cloud. On the other hand, if you have it in KeyPass and that device gets stolen or hosed, well, you might have a world of hurt trying to get back into all your accounts.
Which is, it's funny because you mentioned that. I on my website, when I compare password managers, I put cloud-based and not cloud-based in the con, like the pros and cons. I put it in the con category for all of them. And it confuses some people. It's like, so how is cloud-based a bad thing, but also not cloud-based is a bad thing? And my answer is because there's drawbacks to both. There's, if you're in the cloud, theoretically, not theoretically in the case of LastPass, theoretically, someone could steal your vault and just take all the time in the world trying to crack your password. On the other hand, yes, if you go local, you have to make sure you're keeping good backups or, your device doesn't get stolen or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, that's true of any password manager though, or like passwords, passkeys, regardless. If you're storing them locally, that's something to be aware of.
Once you have taken the step to security of that you're not just reusing the same password and using a password manager, that is always the drawback and risk.
Yeah, you're putting everything in one place, so you really have to make sure whatever you do, whether it's local or whether it's cloud-based, you really have to put extra security on that. So another drawback is there's not really an advantage over security keys. I don't know if that's really a drawback. I mean, it's certainly not a pro, but it's just kind of like I wouldn't say I was hoping. Just, yeah, it's something, I guess it's for people like me. I'm already, I use a YubiKey everywhere I can, and so it's just kind of like, well, this doesn't really give me anything that the YubiKey doesn't, and that's just kind of a bummer, but. So there is a tiny, tiny bit of data that could potentially be submitted, and I'm going to quote the EFF article again. If you store your passkey in a security key or TPM, which would be again, this YubiKey here or the chip on your device, websites can request the make and model of your device depending on whether the browser allows it. Usually this only identifies a broad category of common devices. So it might just say what is that, HID, human interface device or something like that. It's something very vague. But in the past, some manufacturers have shipped keys where each one had a uniquely identifying make and model. Yeah, exactly.
So just make the fingerprinting really easy.
Pretty much, which is also probably why people have valid questions about the privacy of YubiKeys. So basically, it's possible that other manufacturers could make the same mistake, but they point out, quoting the article, it's likely that browsers would block such flawed devices. In general, consumer-facing websites should avoid requesting make and model information, since it is primarily intended for companies managing their internal infrastructure. If you store your passkeys in a password manager, websites can learn which password manager you're using. Although, again, you know, all the ones I recommend have tens of thousands, millions of users, so, you know, have fun digging through that haystack. Similarly, some securities may implement a signature counter for the passkeys stored on them, which I believe from context means how many passkeys you have stored. A good implementation should ensure that the counter is maintained separately for each site, but some security keys can keep a single signature counter for all passkeys, and this can be used across unrelated services to try and correlate your identity by looking for similar values. You can ask the manager or the manufacturer of your security key how they handle signature counters. For most people, the most convenient password manager will be the one built into their operating system, like Windows Hello, iCloud Keychain. And then to use those, you'll have to be logged in with your Microsoft, Google, or Apple account. If you're not already using, if you're not already logged into one of those cloud accounts, logging in may prompt you to share a pile of additional information like your browsing history and bookmarks. You can turn off those features, but it requires some extra work. So I think that's kind of more aimed at, just the average user who doesn't generally look through their settings, doesn't think about those kind of things. So it's just kind of stuff to be aware of. For the average user, again, unless you're trying to hide from targeted attacks, you're probably okay, but these are things to be aware of. And we also talked about it creates a single point of failure. Although, again, this is true for any password manager. You got all your stuff in one area, that's a problem. Sorry. Yeah, okay. So when would I, based on the EFF's article, when would I recommend using a passkey? If you're currently not using a password manager, because that probably means you're either reusing a password or using weak passwords or both, and you're gonna have to get a password manager anyways to use a passkey. So, I mean, if you're not using one at all, may as well check out passkeys. Again, if you're currently reusing passwords, like even if you are using a password manager and you're like, yeah, but I have like the same password across 10 websites or something, then, you know.
No, I have to ask, who is this person and why?
Who?
The person who has taken the journey to use a password manager but is still repeating their password.
My mother, I guarantee it.
Why is she using a password manager then?
Because she took my advice that far and then didn't take my advice to actually change the passwords after importing them.
I have nothing to say to that. Wow.
I say this with humor. Well, no, it's fine. And then
I just was like, surely that's just an anecdote. You're like, no, I know for a fact that happens.
I mean, she can't be the only one. Like, I used to tell people that my mother was, my mother passed away last year, so that's why I'm using past tense. She was like the target audience for the new oil because she was the kind of person who was smart enough to, download an app, sign up for an account. She could manage to install Linux on an old computer using just my text instructions, which I think is great. Not because I think she was dumb. I just don't think I'm that good at explaining things. But,
in fairness, installing Linux is 10,000 times easier than it was 20 years ago.
Fair. But, point being, like, she knew the basics, but there's no way she's going to, she would have never used a YubiKey. She just never would have. So that was the kind of target person I was aiming for. Was like, you kind of know the basics. You're not going to be self-hosting your own server. You're not going to be compiling the code. So, and then, the last case would be if you're not using a YubiKey. Again, if you're using something like a YubiKey, you're pretty much already getting the same benefit. You can switch to passkeys if you want. It's certainly more convenient. I was very impressed with that one-click sign-in, but if you're already using a YubiKey, you're not gaining anything. So again, when not to use them, if you're currently using a security key, again, you can if you want. It's certainly easier, but you're not going to gain anything by doing it. If you have a very high threat model where even a small mistake could be catastrophic, because again, there is that small chance there might be some data shared here and there. There's also the fact, and actually that's my last point, there's also the fact that this is still a very new technology and I haven't heard of any major screw-ups yet, but we don't know if something's going to break tomorrow and now you're like locked out of all your accounts. So even if you do use passkeys, I haven't found any websites that will let you get rid of your passwords entirely and use only passkeys, but if they offer that option, I wouldn't recommend it. I would hold on to the passwords just as a backup. And that was everything I had.
Awesome. Alrighty.
I'm really good at the shorter talks.
Well, as I say, just because we have the room for 2 hours does not mean we always have to actually have talks that by the end you're like, when is this going to be over? Great intro explainer. Do we have questions for Nate about what we learned today? Yeah.
What's up?
What's your knowledge of auth
And also,
Limited.
also, Nate, per a request from somebody watching online, could you repeat any question asked?
Oh, yes. What is my knowledge of Authn, which is like web authentication, right?
It's like an advanced form of 2FA.
Okay. The only time I've ever used it is in conjunction with like hardware tokens. Admittedly, I don't know much about it. I know it falls into, it's not quite the same as a YubiKey, I don't think. I could be wrong here.
I think the light at the end of that tunnel is hardwareless authn, so you wouldn't have to use something like a YubiKey.
Like a passkey, where you could use a software solution instead.
Or, yeah.
I mean, I'm just asking.
Yeah, I think that's the eventual goal that, not requiring a hardware key to.
I think that'd be great, because I know one of my, I wouldn't say complaints, one of my concerns with certain parts of privacy is you hit a point where it starts to like price people out. And that concerns me because, not to get into soapbox, but I really am like hardcore, like privacy is a human right. I fully believe that. And that means that a human right is supposed to be accessible to everybody, which I know in 2024 that's clearly not the case. But it does concern me that there's certain things you can do for free. You can, use a password manager. There's plenty of free ones.
Like KeyPass is free, unlike same way Bitwarden.
Bitwarden's free, Proton Pass is free, 1Password's not, but, and then even then, there's encrypted email providers, Linux is free, but then you have to have the hardware to run Linux. You have to have, once you hit a certain point, especially if you really want to go extra hard, you've got to pay for a data removal service. Like there aren't any free ones of those. You've got to, or...
And any VPN that's free is spying on you, so you've got to pay for a VPN.
There's 2 I'd recommend, but yeah, they're slow. They're 3, but they're all super slow, super limited. Yeah, so it's the same thing. It's like there's a lot you can do for free. But so if there's something that's going to make a more secure option like web authentication that's hardware agnostic, so that people don't have to and that's the other thing is when you buy a hardware key, the recommended advice is to buy 2 in case one of them breaks, which I can also attest from personal experience is a smart move. I am not smart. But like I've been in that situation, and like YubiKeys are like $50. There's cheaper models, but they don't do as much. They're not as robust, and so now you're talking about dropping $100 just to log in everywhere. Like I would welcome something that levels that playing field a little more. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just also go on a general EFF Boston tangent soapbox and say, like Nate, I agree privacy is a fundamental human right. It's actually in the 1948 UN Declaration of Universal Human Rights.
Article 12.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know the exact one. And yeah, I am very concerned that we seem to be moving towards a bifurcated internet where there are 2 business models. It's free and you're spied on, or you pay and you're not spied on. Because it's like, you can pay for services like Proton, you can, hell, there's even now pay for search engines like Kagi that will not data mine you and let you use the search engine. But yet again, it's like, every solution, the only business model we seem to have figured out where they don't spy on you is you have to then pay money, which then, yes, makes it not a universal human right. I haven't even seen somebody as smart as Cory Doctorow propose a way out of this dichotomy business model yet. So I'm not saying I have the answer, but I'm very concerned that, fine, there's a solution for people like us who can afford privacy, but that's not a very satisfactory answer. I have a question from somebody online for you.
Sure.
And repeat the question, please. We've been trained to periodically update passwords to limit their time exposure to hacking. Do sites using Passkeys provide any features for updating, generating a new passkey, or are those planned at a later date?
That's a good question. So the question was, historically, the advice has been to change your passwords periodically. Do sites have any sort of implementation for that for passkeys? First of all, that advice for passwords is generally outdated these days. There are some situations where it makes sense, like, for example, companies will do this sometimes, just as kind of a safety net in case like they fire somebody and then they forget to terminate the user's account. If they're making everybody change passwords every few months, then eventually that person's not going to be able to log in anyways. So that's why they do that. For passkeys, passkeys, I don't think that would be necessary because, again, the private key on your device is the important part. As far as I know, I personally haven't run into any websites that will prompt you to change your password unless they're like managed by your company. I know a lot of password managers have a feature, or at least some of them do, have a feature where you can tell it, remind me in 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever. I'd imagine you could probably do the same thing if you want to, but I mean, again, unless your private key gets breached, I don't think it should really be that big of a deal. But
And I'm just sitting here speculating that, okay, you're worried that somebody got a keylogger on your device, but I'm like, well, if it's on there and you don't know about it, rotating your password still won't help you.
right, that's a totally different thing. Speaking of, I'm in the middle of a conversation with my brother about the anti-cheat in League of Legends. I just remembered that.
Yeah, that could get me on a whole other rant about the level of access all these modern games anti-cheats want.
Yeah, it's awesome. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely change them periodically if you feel like it, but
You would, basically the answer is you can't promise there's not a reason or security advantage, but you are hard pressed to see what it would be.
it's more like it won't hurt anything other than the fact that it's a real pain. Because I honestly did that when I first got into privacy. I had KeyPass set up to remind me to change it I think I set it to 90 days. And within 6 months, I was just like, meh. And granted, that was also my fault because I did that thing that I don't recommend where I sat down one Saturday afternoon and changed literally every single account password in one sitting. So every 90 days, all of my KeyPass would expire. So that's kind of why I quit doing that. But
yeah, I think that gets into general advice I give about don't let perfect be enemy of the good when it comes to security. Like, it's far better that you have some accounts out there that are not on your password manager and you slowly migrate them as you remember, as opposed to you never even start because there's a list of 200 accounts and you feel overwhelmed.
which is kind of what I recommend on the website now. I'm like, hey, the important stuff, your email, your bank, stuff like that, like go change that right now. But then everything else just...
But like, oh no,
Yeah.
they hacked my account on a movie forum. And
Right.
oh no.
Yeah, just next time you order pizza, change that one. Next time you buy something on Amazon, change that one. And then also start the deletion process because it'll take a week. And it's Amazon.
How about instead of changing passwords, you just forget them and always do forget my password?
I mean, that's a choice. You could do that.
I mean, do you like going through that whole flow every time you...
I was going to say,
It's easier not than trying to remember.
Well, that's the point of a password manager. It takes me way less time to just copy and paste the password in than to log into my email, wait for the email to come in, click the link, change it again. It can't be the same as it's been the last 3 times. That whole thing.
CAPTCHA that's now really hard and 60 questions long.
Because the CAPTCHA has to be hard enough and AI can't trivially solve it.
They are genuinely starting to annoy me with that
You
one.
can't do it 3 times in a row and then you're locked and you have to try to do the forget your password thing the next day. That's happened
Right.
to me.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that. But
I guess, and I know, you're not a technical expert, and I think the EFF blog post goes over this quite a bit to try to persuade people, but like, I guess, what do you say to people who are very much on the tinfoil hatty end, who might say like, well, these seem to be being developed and pushed by big tech. There must be some backdoor honeypot catch to this.
so the question was, what do I say to the people who are convinced that because big tech is behind these, they must not be safe? The sarcastic answer is I don't say anything because I don't think I can convince those people and it's just not worth my time anymore. The answer, if you're genuinely asking, is to my understanding, these are open standards. Just like TOTP, just like hashing passwords, encryption in general, like these are not proprietary from big tech. So I'll be the first one to admit, I can't read code. I'm not going to be one of those people who's like, just go read the code, it's right there. I can't read code. But the people that I trust that can read code all say that this is open and this is safe, and I trust them. So
I mean, and that being said, just because you can read code doesn't mean you actually will. It's like, I can read code, but that doesn't mean I go and audit Signal's entire code base on GitHub.
Right.
That turns into a full-time job really quick.
Sure. And we've seen news articles in the past about how there's been vulnerabilities lying in dormant in open source programs for years.
I'm not even a security researcher to the point where just because I looked at it, I couldn't promise there was no vulnerability in it. That's not my specialty.
Right.
Let's see. I have one other thing, though, I wanted to ask you, trying to address my own thoughts on it. Or wasn't I just had it? All right, and here's, I'm trying to think of various, both things I've thought of about it, but also just paranoid ramblings I've seen. What would you say to people who are saying that actually, because of the quality, that they are like kind of tied, they kind of solidify the idea that, okay, fine, it's encrypted and anonymous, depending on how you do it, but you're tying a login to a single person. Like, could I get very tinfoil heady about this and be like, this, is trying to make it, in some ways, maybe easier for companies or advertisers of like that, right now, a lot of data for certain companies and accounts is muddy because there might be 5 people all sharing that username and password to log in. Is there any validity to maybe thinking this is also being pushed because it makes it easier for companies to uniquely define digital identities and market to them or spy on them? Maybe they don't know exactly who it is, but they can be confident this is one person's uncorrupted, pure data.
So the question was, in a nutshell, could this be used to force people to stop sharing logins for the purpose of more correctly identifying users? Just gross oversimplification.
Yeah, that's essentially what I asked.
I think that is a valid concern. That is something that the EFF pointed out with, the example I gave with Netflix is, if I, let's say me and my sister shared a Netflix account, I would have to set her up with an account, and now they would know that's different passkeys because they're going to be different key pairs. I think that's certainly possible. I don't think that was the motivation.
Would the universal adoption of importing-exporting fix that? Because you could share the private key with someone you trust?
In theory, yes, I think so. There's so many ways to track people now. So using that example, my sister lives out of state, so and I don't think she uses a VPN. So if she's constantly logging in from that state and I'm constantly logging in from Texas, it's pretty obvious.
Right,
but
it's sort of like, okay, fine, you figured out a way to share the private key. It's still obvious to Netflix this is not the same person.
Which, to be fair, they've already been doing. But
well, yes, although, as I've joked, well, if you really want to stick it to Netflix, you can always just set up a virtual VPN and be like, oh, they live in the same house as me, but
right.
You have to be pretty technically savvy to do that. And
remote interior.
For $8 a month, it quickly seems not worth the effort, which is what they're betting on.
And it's working, apparently.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed. I do think that is a valid concern, and that's something that the EFF pointed out in their article is, you have to keep in mind that could create, intentionally or otherwise, could create separate users. In response to the second part, do I think that's their intention? I don't think so. I think they're already able to collect so much data on so many people that I think it's a liability is kind of their motivation. And for the record, I come from a mentality of don't ascribe to malice that which can be explained by stupidity / greed / incompetence or whatever. I think they're just tired of constantly having data breach, which does hurt them financially. Like, does it put them out of business? No, of course not. But it's still a hit, and that's still money that could have gone into the CEO's pocket to buy another yacht.
Well, even if it doesn't put them out of business, it would though make it where when the real money they may care about, which are like business-to-business contracts, well, if I know somebody's been data breached a lot, I'm more hesitant to do business with them. Right.
But yeah, that's my point, is like it does hurt them. And so I think that's really where they're coming from, is like they're kind of just tired of dealing with this. And the overwhelming amount of data breaches are, the top 2 easily are people not updating their crap and just phishing, whether it's internal or external, somebody in the company or an end user. Somebody clicks a link, downloads a thing, falls for it, and gives their password up. And this solves that. So we're already cutting any kind of data breach or account compromise pretty much in half. And not that I'm trying to defend these companies because they're garbage, but
Right.
these companies are already overwhelmed as it is. You know, like you can find stories all day of like when Twitter had moderators, Twitter moderators and Facebook moderators, and like they're just overwhelmed. That's why there's so much garbage on these platforms. And I'm talking about like actual bad stuff like CSAM or illegal content. Like they're overwhelmed because there's like, you know, 2,000 of them, and there's literally half the planet using the platform. They can only keep up so much.
Right.
So,
in other words, you know, there is a legitimate argument to be made that there may be and I think this is what the EFF article was saying, there may be a minute reduction in privacy from passkeys, but the gain in security is so enormous, it is hard to argue it's maybe not entirely worth the trade-off, because
Right.
the gain in security actually enhances privacy in a lot of situations.
and looking at it from the company side as well, where I was going with that is like, that's now almost an entire department of people who are just handling, oh, my account got hacked and I need it back. You know, like,
I mean,
all those are going to
just-
drop to
just
almost
those
nothing.
endless, sketchy, fake Facebook things that'll
Exactly.
tag your page and be like, "You're in violation. Click this link." You know.
And now that's staff that they can free up to do something else, or just fire them and increase profit. So, you know, and then yeah, from I just lost my train of thought. But it was something pertaining to
we
what you
have
said.
one question online here that, you know, you've sort of already addressed it, but maybe
Sure.
this person just tuned in. So they were just wanting to know, are like, and I mean, so, you know, this is, I'll let you explain why this is you can clarify the question. The question is like, are passkeys better than password managers like Bitwarden? And you know, I think the answer is, explain, you know. But the question
yeah.
and explain for our
So the question was, are passkeys better than traditional passwords, specifically password managers? Well, first of all, you're going to need a password manager to use a passkey. There's pros and cons overall. Just to kind of summarize what we already said, not to be passive aggressive or anything, but it's generally, if I had to give one answer, I'd say yes, but it depends on a lot of other factors, like, you know, your threat model, if you're already using strong passwords, if you're using strong two-factor, things like that.
Here's a final question I can think of, at least for me, that you may or may not have an answer to. What do you see the advantages, disadvantages, or even just interaction that the adoption of passkey technology will have with the rise of essentially generative AI and bots powered by it? You know, you were talking about websites being overwhelmed as they already are. You know, we've already seen that AI-driven scams are making these already overwhelmed websites like YouTube just now drown in garbage. Do you see passkeys improving the situation with regards to AI, staying the same, or ironically making it worse, or have you not done enough research on that to have an informed opinion yet?
I mean, are we talking about like account compromise specifically?
Or I mean, just in general, like AI kind of turbocharging a lot of these scams, you know, or trying to break into accounts and whatnot, or I don't know. I don't entirely have a question for myself. I'm just sort of trying to think, you know, everybody's rightfully concerned about AI making a lot of scams and hacking even worse on the internet. I'm curious how passkeys will or will not interact with this situation.
Well, I think it's like we just talked about with platforms being overwhelmed. If people switch to passkeys, theoretically, not that I advocate people going out and clicking every link they see, but at that point it almost doesn't matter because it becomes almost impossible to steal your passkey to begin with.
And I guess, you know, other than maybe a AI being very convincing at trying to sound like, no, I mean, that's the thing. Like, even if it's an AI-crafted phishing email that sounds really, really convincing, phishing doesn't work with this technology.
Right. And I mean, there's always going to be exceptions. I don't know if maybe somebody can find one that like tries to brute force keys, but even then that sounds like more like a quantum computing problem and not a chat GPT problem.
An AI can't necessarily brute force keys any faster than a traditional script can. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe it could help scammers come up with convincing ways to get you to export your keys once that's a thing, but
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, that's all I could think of.
I just had to raise it because that's what everybody thinks about these days, AI
Right.
and everything, so I had to go there. Let's see. Do we have any other questions from anybody else? It is fine if we don't, because as I said, just because we get this room for 2 hours does not mean we always have to test everybody's patience every month. And I think I've exhausted smarty pants things to ask you, so I'm
Yeah. All right. That's all I got.
All right, well, yeah, first of all, let's give Nate a round of applause. As I say, he's very good at explaining hard stuff in good layman terms, so really appreciate that. And yes, you should check out the new oil if you want a whole bunch of wonderful privacy and security guides that make stuff that can seem really scary because behind the scenes it involves a lot of hard math seem easy and accessible. So I highly recommend it. We will be back to our normal meetup time next month, second Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. As I said, we're going to have a remote speaker with Carrie Parker, Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, talking about pseudo-random numbers. So it might be an interesting supplement to what we just talked about a bit here. You might get a little more insight into what is going on with some of those public-private key pairs and how computers do that. If you want to stick around, we usually go and get a drink in the hotel lobby if you want to chat and get to know us a little better if you're new. Otherwise, we'll see you next month. And thanks everyone online. I don't even know if I can be seen from there. But we'll see you next time. Thanks. Oh, and if anybody needs parking validation, you can get it from the woman Emily at the front desk. As I said, I'm not really complaining that this month is a little slow. I've been, I barely had the bandwidth to get myself here this month.
Thanks for coming.
Again, even though it's early, I'm going to do the bar.
Oh, that's cool. I always just offer as an option for people who actually, or especially for people who are new, who actually want to get a chance to know who the hell we are. I always
Well,
offer it.
once I get through the semester, I'm going to do.
Well, as I said, we're back to normal time next month. Should be good stuff.
But I've got some screwdrivers.
Very good. Well, good luck with that. I mean, I'm happy you're continuing. Well, I mean, you mean just grading screenplays? I thought that was related to your own film.
No, that's going to happen once I get through the daily semester.
If that's going to do more come summer.
Yes.